out, Brian. The audio clip's going to have a lot of background noise because there's a shite ton of people here. But, yeah, Merry Christmas also to you. And honestly, that first, everyone started so bloody slow. And when you're like 15th right in the middle, it's just bloody carnage when those guys at the front are going slow. So it's like you just are so surgy, not skiing smooth, not skiing efficient. So I was just like, yeah, fuck this. I'm going to go to the front and just ski a regular speed. Like, it wasn't a surge or anything, but those other guys were legit walking, and it was, okay, if you're at the front and walking, it's not a problem. But when you're bib 15 and the people at the front are walking and there's people, you're on the person in front of your skis and the person behind you's on your poles, it's just bloody carnage. So I was like, yeah, okay. These boys ain't going to do it, I will.
Oh, Ethan, we're back with the podcast, and we open it up with a quick race recap from Campbell Wright about his first lap of the mass start. And for those of you, spoiler alert, I mean, if you're watching this podcast, hopefully it's not a spoiler yet, but Campbell decided to take it out pretty quick on that first lap. So pretty interesting to hear his feedback on his first lap there.
Yeah, I think that might have been the best podcast opening we've ever had. That was great.
What are you talking about? My previous opens haven't been that good.
No. That was cool to hear what Campbell had to say. And watching the race, that's exactly what it looked like. It looked like they were going extra slow for the first lap of mass start, and usually eventually someone kind of spices it up, goes to the front, goes a little harder. And it was cool to see Campbell be that person and have it not go horribly wrong because he still shot clean that first shooting.
Yeah, and I was also kind of hoping that maybe someone would have said something to him or something, and he would have had this feedback, because it seemed like when he was trying to go past Johannes Thingnes and he was getting tied up with Sturlaholm leg ride, I really wanted one of them to just be like, dude, what are you doing? But seems like Campbell is just like, nah, I'm just gonna let it rip out there. So yeah, everyone, welcome back to the podcast. This is the high level of biathlon coverage that you get. So hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening or watching. Yeah, Ethan, first trimester is in the books. A lot to talk about here. A lot of excitement in Le Grand Bornand this weekend. But yeah, just in general, what is your feeling about the biathlon season so far before we dive into all the hits and everything?
Yeah, I think we've had 3 great weekends of racing. I think we're starting to see who athletes are this season. They've shaken off the rust. They've gotten back into the groove. A few of the surprise athletes from the first weekend that we seem to always have kind of gone back down to their usual level or not quite overperforming every single race. So I think we're kind of finding out who's legit, who's not, who's maybe in a hot seat to go back down to the IBU Cup, who is who needs to pick it up, turn things around for the second trimester and world champs and not that long from now. But it's been a super awesome first trimester. We've got lots of stuff to talk about from this week. And the Grand Bornand is always one of the awesome races to watch with the fans and the French and how much it means to the people there. And it made me pretty excited for the Olympics there and I guess the next Olympic cycle.
Yeah. All right, let's dive into it then with our first hit here. All right, got some new graphics courtesy of Le Grand Bornand. There's such, like you said, there was such good crowd engagement, such good audio that I had to update our graphics here. So thank you to the crowd in Le Grand Bornand. But Ethan, Tarjei Boe is back. He had to sit out the sprint in the pursuit due to the absolutely incredible depth of his teammates. And then he just comes back and kind of just gives a big middle finger to everyone by saying, this is my mass start. I mean, it's like you could not make a more storybook situation of he's a champion of the past. He's a veteran on the team. He's getting pushed out by these young guys. And there's actually, from what I understand, there's a ton of controversy in the Norwegian biathlon community about Tarjei and his basically him not retiring, him continuing to take spots. And I mean, hey, if he's continuing to earn it, I mean, last year he came in second overall. So if he's continuing to earn his spot on the team, then I don't understand where that beef is coming from. But I mean, if he's getting, World Cup start spots that he might not necessarily be deserving or earning, especially when you have this incredible depth, I can understand where there's a little bit of anxiety and frustration. But I mean, finally, the Norwegian Federation kind of puts his feet to the fire a little bit and says, hey, you don't get to start. We're keeping Uldal because he had an absolutely great start to the season, or a great World Cup portion of the season in Hagfeldsen. And he comes back, gets his one opportunity, sort of on like a technicality because he's in the top 25 overall. So he technically gets to start regardless of whether his team wants him to or not. And he freaking delivers, like, in a way that you literally cannot beat winning.
Yeah, it's crazy that we're talking about an athlete getting, it's time for them to, hang it up, think about retiring, when Tarjei is sitting in 11th overall, having missed out on the sprint and pursuit from this past weekend. But I mean, I think they kind of had to tell him, like, hey, you get this one chance to prove that you can stay here. It's either a podium, flower ceremony, win, whatever their criteria was. I'm sure they're never going to tell us what the criteria would have been, but they gave him this one chance to prove that he can stay up here. And, for any other country in the world, I think getting second in the overall in the previous season should get you the whole next season guaranteed. But this is Norway we're talking about. So for him to come back and win the mass start and look like the Tarjei Boe we've seen and we've known and loved for the past like 10, 13 years, however many years it's been, was awesome to see. I think he's someone that every biathlon fan enjoys watching and always wants to do well. But I think, we have in our notes here that some of the other Norwegians are now in the hot seat after Tarjei, proved that he can hang with the big dogs in this race. So I think we might continue to see shakeups on the Norwegian team the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I mean, so you got to think, what was Tarjei thinking with Uldal winning the sprint, getting his first World Cup podium and win, winning the sprint. And it seems like the sprint was last week at this point. I mean, so much has happened between now and then. But yeah, Uldal wins the sprint. So he's like basically secured his spot on the World Cup for at least the next trimester, definitely the next couple of races. And so, yeah, Tarjei was really had his back up against the wall and was able to deliver. But yeah, kind of like what you said, Stronsheim now, I think he's in the hot seat because he was 55th in the sprint and did not start the pursuit for some reason. I think at some point Christensen's going to be in the hot seat. And I'm trying to recall how we ended last podcast, because we had this discussion of, who do you bring to the Grand Bornand? And I think both of us kept Tarjei and ended up pushing down or pushing out one, either Christensen or Stronsheim. But it was actually, I texted you right after we recorded that podcast, because I saw the news as I was uploading the podcast that they decided that they were going to sit Tarjei. And so it's just really interesting that that's what they ended up choosing. But now, I mean, you got to believe Stronsheim's in the hot seat. And when we're looking down at the IBU Cup of who's going to replace him, I guess this is kind of hard actually, because I got to pull up the overall here, but you have Johannes Thingnes, you have Sturla, you have Sorum, who's in 6th, Martin Uldal, who's going to be hanging out now. He's currently in 9th overall after 2 weekends of racing. Tarjei in 11th. Your 6th guy is either going to be Christensen or Stronsheim. And if you decide to just send Stronsheim back to the IBU, Christensen stays as your 6th. Nobody is going to get pulled up probably for World Cup number 4, which is in Oberhof. Nobody will probably be pulled up. Stronsheim will probably be sent back down. But then on the IBU Cup, you're going to have Johannes Dale, Bakken, Sievert Bakken's back, Isak Frey, and then Stronheim. Those 5 are going to basically be battling, I think, against either Christensen or Tarjei at World Cup number 4, Oberhof, to take a spot there. So, it's going to be. It always is tough the first couple of weekends of the season because you're like, oh, where are people going to land? Who should go up, who should go down. But now that we've had the first trimester under our belt, it seems like things are starting to shake out and start to sort of fall into place here, with Uldal, becoming secure on the World Cup, and maybe someone like Stronheim or Dolly Shevdal sort of filtering back down to the IBU Cup. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. I'm trying to pull up the IBU Cup schedule to see. I think they go to Arbor next, and I believe that it's going to be the same weekend as the World Cup in Oberhof. See, Oberhof is January 6th through 12th, and Arbor is January 6th through 12th. So it's going to be the same weekend in the same nation. Actually, probably pretty close to each other. I don't know where Arbor is in relation to Oberhof, but I think it's in that same general region of the country. Okay, so it's a 4-hour drive. It's not super close, but but still, it's going to be interesting to see. But I don't know. So of those 6 that I just named, really, there's Christensen, Tarjei, and probably Uldal on the hot seat. I don't say Sorum too. I would say really the only 2 who are secure at this point are probably Johannes Thingnes and Spiller Lagride. Of those 4, who do you think who's gonna be the odd man out after Oberhof?
I think the Norwegians are just going to have to continue to go weekend by weekend, and whoever has the worst weekend, gets sent down, and they get the next weekend on the IBU Cup to prove that they, can win down there, and then they'll get brought back up. Maybe. I mean, Dolly Shevdal hasn't been brought back up yet. I agree. I think Boe and Lagrad I'm assuming that they're safe considering they're first and second in the overall by a pretty good margin. But the whole Norwegian shuffling feels like it's almost like a panic because they're not sitting 1 through 7 in the overall right now on the men's side. They still have 4 in the top 10, but for them, that's by their standards and their history, that's not quite what they're used to.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting because I've been kind of feeling the same way. Like we just become so accustomed to the last couple of years of Norway just absolutely dominating that when I look at the overall, and we're going to talk about the overall, I think a little bit later in the podcast, but when you look at the overall and they're not sweeping 1 through 6 like they have in the past, it does feel like there's, I don't want to say panic, but it does feel like there's a little bit of like, oh, what do we do? We gotta, something's gotta get better here, and there's not that just absolute dominance. You're seeing the French guys be competitive. You're seeing Sebastian Samuelsson be competitive with the Norwegians, even with Johannes Thingnes, and we'll talk about him a little bit more specifically later. But I don't know. It feels different this year. It's almost like, panic is not the word I want to use, but panic almost is the best word to use. It's like, what? Oh no, they're not going 1 through 5 right now. What's going to happen? It'll be interesting to see. Maybe sometimes it just takes some time to kind of move back into the season, get back into the racing, and I mean, I will say they have stepped it up. I mean, that sprint race at Grand Bornand here, I think they had 5 in the top 10. They had 3 in the top 5, so 3 in the flower ceremony, and then Sorum and Christensen were 13, 14 in the Hochfilzen sprint. They had 4 in the top 5, and then 7 was Uldal. So I mean, they're not bad by any means. they're not like, they don't suck. They're still really good. But it's different. Maybe we just become so accustomed to the absolute domination that it's like, oh, this is not good look compared to how it's been in the past. So I don't know. We'll see. And oh, see this. I've already messed it up. I used the wrong graphic because they're not in order. Go with a miss here. Really heartbreaking finish here for Janine Richard, who was in third place the entire race of the women's mass start, and then just got beat by Polina Fialkova at the line. And she didn't stop to celebrate. I watched the clip back a few more times. She didn't stop to like fully celebrate, but it did seem like she was sort of coasting to the line a little bit to, like as if she was about to celebrate, and then suddenly Fialkova just kind of went right past her, and you could just see the absolute heartbreak in her eyes. So it sucks, it's tough to see. It seemed like there was a lot of tears after that, even during the flower ceremony. I watched all the way through to see how she would react, and it did seem like she was very upset the whole time. But I mean, I would be too. You're on the cusp of your first World Cup, and at home in front of your family and home crowd, and then you just get beat right at the line when she probably feels like she could have sprinted that last 100 meters and probably secured the third. But yeah, I don't know. It's despite all that, it's really, I'd say, inspiring for the French crowd to see how well Richard did, being 22 years old. And if you could have pointed the finger at any of these French women to be like, oh, they're going to be the one that is the hometown hero at Le Grand Bornand. But it really was Janine Richard after she had a great weekend at home.
Yeah, and you hate to see it happen to anyone, but hats off to Fialkova for continuing to ski that whole last lap all the way to the finish line as hard as she could. But this is still a great race for Jean Richard. Is this her best ever World Cup finish too?
Yeah, her best ever was the Pursuit. She got fourth, and then she got fourth in the mass start again. So her two best results at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think going into the weekend, if you had told her she was going to get 12th and 2 4ths, that is an awesome weekend right there at home, especially as a young athlete. Obviously she's devastated not to get the podium there, but the future is definitely very bright for Jean Richard, and that French team has just been, the younger athletes on that French team have just been crushing it this whole season. And I think, biathlon is a brutal world. You have to be able to forget about things and move on, learn something from it, take the next step forward. But hopefully she's able to do that, take some time over the Christmas break, kind of gather herself again emotionally and mentally, and then be ready to rock and roll come Oberhof in January.
Yeah. So with her two fourth places, she moves up into 8th overall, just behind, like literally 8 points back of Justine Breza-Boucher. And if you would tell Janine that after the first trimester, you're going to be basically just as good as Justine Breza-Boucher, like you said, I think she would take that in a heartbeat. So really cool to see. I mean, we talk about how much depth France has, and just to have another athlete come up and be that competitive is great. Same thing with Océane Michelin, 12th overall. Not as great a start this weekend as she had earlier in the season, but still holding strong in 12th place. And holding strong is France's really strong number 12, or sorry, number 5. But I want to talk a little bit about the Blue Bib here, because it's really interesting with Janine Richard winning she currently has the Blue Bib going into the break, but she, with her 4th place, she actually lost a little bit of ground on Selena Grotian, who is also U23 and ended up winning that mass start and closed that gap. With that win, Grotian went from 3rd in the Blue Bib race to passing Michelin, and then right behind Richard. So we actually have a pretty exciting Blue Bib battle going on right now on the women's side.
Yeah, and I think we're still missing a few key players. We've seen some There's been rumors of some sickness and illness going around the German team, and we talked about them a lot at the beginning of the year. And if they're healthy, I can see them getting right back in the mix with Tannheimer, especially. But in a way, the Blue Bib race is almost closer and at this point more exciting than the actual women's overall, which I don't think we would have expected or seen coming. But it's always fun to see young athletes do well, but to see so many of them doing well, especially, I don't even think you mentioned Sarah Anderson, who's still, sitting right there in fourth and definitely within striking distance if she has a podium and some of the other athletes have a not so great race. But I think the Blue Bib on the women's side, I think, is going to be one to watch, not only for the excitement of just this season, but for the future of biathlon, because that's what we're witnessing right now. And it looks really fun to watch.
Yeah. Sarah Anderson fourth, Kirkheide from Norway is fifth, and then Tannheimer, who I think, me personally, I had her fighting for this Blue Bib. She, like you said, missed pretty much this whole weekend due to illness, but she was doing very well in the overall. After the second weekend in Hagfeldsen, she was second place, right behind Michelin. And then Richard, Grocia, and Anderson, all of these girls were able to sneak ahead of her due to not racing in Le Grand Bornand, which is tough. But I think she has the talent that she's going to re-enter the race, so to speak, in Oberhof, in Ruhpolding when we come back from the break. But yeah, it's really interesting and really cool just to see it's literally like a glimpse of the future of biathlon, when I'm looking at these names, obviously Richard, she could win any day. Like she was only like one missed shot away from potentially winning that race against Preuss, because Preuss did not seem super strong in that mass start. Grosjean won the mass start. Michelin has the potential to win. Anderson has the potential to podium. So does Kirkheide. So any of these women, not only are they fighting for the Blue Bib, but they're definitely also fighting for potentially a win any day. So it's just really exciting, really cool. All right. Got that one. All right. So now we move on to another hit. Johannes Thingnes back on top. I got to be honest, he doesn't seem like he's the dominant Johannes Thingnes that we've had in the past. But there was a Reddit thread by user EveryTourist9316, and they kind of brought this question up to the biathlon subreddit about what stage of Johannes Thingnes career are we in. And they presented this idea that the greats have like basically 4 phases of their career. You have the electric beginning phase, the middle, imperious phase where everyone's just in awe. They have the 3, the latter phase, and then 4 is the about to retire. And this person suggests that they think that we're in the phase 3 or the latter phase where everyone's just a little bit like, oh, this is boring now. Personally, I've been kind of in this sort of this is boring now for the last couple seasons, in my opinion. But I think we're actually looking at phase 4 where they're sort of in the about to retire phase. And we have to realize that we were witnessing history. I don't see Johannes Thingnes going much past the Cortina Olympics, in my opinion. He's already talked about how he has the family, he has the kids now. He wants to spend time with them. And also when you just look at his performance, even though, yes, he does have the yellow bib, he doesn't have that dominance that I think we're typically used to. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, for sure. And I think he always seems to start the year a little slow. The first weekend, at least for sure, takes him a little bit to get back into it. And then he kind of gets into gear and then starts winning and skiing 30, 45 seconds faster than everybody else. I think we're still waiting for him to kick into gear. He's kind of been getting by on having good whole races where he has to hit the targets to get on the podium. He can't afford the 1-2 shot buffer that he seemed to always have. But I think we are kind of, the biathlon community kind of taking it for granted when he misses in his first pro and he goes into the penalty loop, we're all disappointed. And when he shoots clean, we're like, okay, cool. That's just what he does. But I think we have to appreciate it because, like you said, I don't know how much longer he's going to be around. I don't think he's going to make it a whole nother Olympic cycle, considering he's 31 years old right now and is starting to see everyone else catch up on the ski speed. His greatest strength is no longer as great of a strength as it's been in the past. But it does kind of feel like we're getting into that fourth phase you talked about, retiring. It's always sad to see a great athlete retire and the sport's kind of left in a new place where it hasn't been for a while. Unfamiliar faces at the top. Who's going to be the overall leader? We've pegged Johannes to be the overall leader for the past 5-6 years now without even second guessing it. I still think he's going to have an awesome season this year, a great season next year. And then we'll just have to see what happens after that.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. This is something to put into perspective. You mentioned that, he doesn't have that dominance on the skis like he used to have. Back in 2023, the year that he won 19 races and set all these records for most wins in a year and just absolutely blew the doors off of everyone, his skiing, like percent back from medium, which is sort of the standard metric for skiing, was minus 5.95. So almost minus 6% faster than the median skier. The second best skier of the season that year was Martin Ponsaloma, and he was minus 4.12. So Johannes Thingnes Boe was skiing like nearly a full percentage and 3/4 faster. No, he was skiing a percentage and 3/4 faster than the next fastest guy, who had a massive advantage over the next fastest guy. This season, after the first trimester, believe it or not, Johannes is still actually the fastest percent skier at minus 4.71, but he's only 1/10 of a percent ahead of Sebastian Samuelsson, who is the next fastest. So it's funny because we're talking about like, oh, is he washed up? He doesn't seem as dominant. He doesn't have that secret weapon of his ski speed anymore. He's still technically the fastest skier out there. And from a performance standpoint, his shooting, I thought last year was great. His shooting is actually up this year from last year so far. So from like a performance standpoint, just trying to see where his total hit rate is. He's still one of the better shooters in the field, not the best, sure, at 88.46%. From a performance standpoint, he's still overall the best athlete out there. So it's just kind of funny how, like, we're talking about this with the Norwegian team as well. We saw so much dominance last season and the year before that now it's kind of like, oh boy, like everyone must be worried because they don't have that same level of dominance. It's kind of the same for Johannes. It's like, oh boy, he must be worried. He doesn't have that same level of dominance, but he's still the best. And also it's sort of, hopefully this sort of shines a little light on just how hard it is to be this strong. I mean, we can't take for granted how dominant he was the last couple of years when you have this such incredible talent from the field. Any one of those other Norwegians on his team, easily be greatest athletes ever. Kantan Mae, Sebastian Samuelsson, Emilian Jacqueline, any of these guys could go down as some of the greatest athletes of their time. And the fact that Johannes is so much better than them, I think it just shines light on how amazing Johannes Thingnes Boe has been. I don't know. I think it's interesting. I do think, just looking at the overall, I mean, in my opinion, I think he's kind of got it wrapped up. I don't think – I think it would need a really big mess up or something special from him to blow it at this point, or it would take something miraculous from someone else. Like Strula would have to get extremely fast on the skis all of a sudden, or Emilian Jacqueline would have to just tighten up his shooting or something miraculously like that. Unfortunately, I don't think Perot or Samuelson are just at that level right now where they could have a miraculous, second part of the season. But yeah, I think he's got the yellow bib again. I really think the question is now: is he going to get the wins that he needs in order to surpass Orlando Bjorndalen?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good question right there. Bjorndalen sits at 95, and Johannes right now is at 88. I think with the season Johannes is having, he's bound to get at least a couple more wins. And if he sticks around another year, we know he's going to win some races. So I think he should be feeling pretty good about himself in terms of catching Bjorndalen's record. But, in previous years for Johannes, a bad race would be considered off the podium. This year, he's been off the podium twice, and we're calling it, a bad season where he's falling off, which is just crazy to me. But I think Johannes, and we hear the commentators talking about this almost every race, that he's chasing this record. I think he might think it's cool to get the record, but he just wants to go out there and consistently have good races, keep, winning and proving that he's the top dog. And if that he gets there this year, if he gets there next year, I think he should feel pretty confident that he's going to get there eventually.
Yeah. And I think this is a really interesting stat, and I was tweeting about this the other day, but Phil Maillet is currently ranked 8th all time for wins with 16. Tarjei Boe with his win, where is he? With his win, he's now 12th all time. That's pretty wild to think that Phil Maillet and Boe are both, or Tarjei, are both top 15. Here's Ligrid, 14th of biathletes all time. And they're just so overshadowed by the dominance of Johannes Thingnes Boe that I almost feel like they don't get appreciation. And Ligrid certainly does not get appreciation for how good of a biathlete he is in terms of historical perspective, because he's not winning every single race like Johannes Thingnes Boe is. So it's just kind of interesting when you put it in this perspective of all the biathletes to ever race and all these big names that are on this list. Quentin Phil Maillet is right in there. And when I look at Phil Maillet today, I'm kind of like, he's washed. Jacqueline's better than him. Perot is going to be better than him, but it's like, that guy is top 10 all-time biathletes. And yeah, I don't know, just kind of interesting when you put it in this perspective. We'll go back to us here. Oh, there we go. All right, let's switch over to the women's side, though. Is Preuss, in my opinion, I think Preuss has got the yellow bib locked up as well, which is kind of crazy because you mentioned this earlier. I thought we were going to see a massive fight on the women's side. I thought there was going to be this crazy battle for the yellow bib. And I don't know, it kind of seems like Preuss has just got it locked up.
I totally agree. I think this is hers to lose. She's been in the flower ceremonies every race. All the other athletes that are in contention right now, like Elvira, Lujan Minot, Julia Simone, they have race results down in the 20s, 30s, even 40s. And I just don't see Preuss, even if she has a bad race, I don't see her finishing that far down and losing that many points. I think we know that some of the athletes that aren't racing right now that are dealing with some health things like Tandrevald and Vitozzi and Davidova, they're out of the race, at least out of the race for the overall. But, look at that graph from Real Biathlon. Preuss is just destroying the rest of the competition every single race. It's going to take a lot for anyone to catch her, for sure.
Yeah. I was doing some math the last couple of years, and on average, the winner of the overall was scoring approximately 55 points per race. And I know that they've updated the point system and stuff the last couple of years, so it's not comparing apples to apples. But on average, the winner of the overall was scoring 55 points per race. This year, Preuss is currently earning 70 points per race. which is insane. Not on the same level as Johannes Thingnes in 2023 when he had 19 wins, but just like she is so far ahead of pace that let's assume Vitozzi came back after the Christmas break and was like primed, perfect, ready to go, and won out the entire rest of the season. And Preuss was continuing her just like, second place, third place, fourth place sort of performance. Preuss would win. Same thing with Tandervold. Tandervold comes back with the points that she already has from racing earlier in the season, which again isn't so much. After missing this weekend, she's dropped down pretty far. Oh, she's dropped down really far. Where is she? Tandervold. Okay, so she has 2 races this year, 33 points. If she came back and won out the rest of the season, would not even come close to Preuss. So unless Preuss, like I said, Preuss absolutely tanks after the season, misses a bunch of stages. And I mean, we're kind of saying that like, oh, like it's almost inevitable that she wins. Let's not forget the reason she has not won, and the reason she only has, I think, 3 or 4 wins in her entire career is because she's been so plagued with illness and injury that I don't think she's out of the woods yet in that regard. But if she can stay healthy, then I think it looks pretty good for her. But I mean, if she does end up missing a couple races because of illness or something, and unfortunately, I don't think Oberg has what it takes to overthrow her. And unfortunately, I think Jamino this weekend in Le Grand Bornand was so bad for her, scoring such few points that, I mean, it's going to take something crazy for Preuss to lose it. But I don't know. I mean, it's like good for her. I think she's always been sort of a fan favorite, but she also just hasn't been there, like I said, because she's been ill. She's been injured. She's always had these issues. So I don't know. She's always been sort of off my radar. Hard to say if I'm like a fan of hers or not, but I will say one thing is like she is super consistent. And also, honestly, the mass start that she comes in second in Le Grand Bornand, that was kind of a masterclass in racing. She was like, I'm not feeling it on the skis. I'm not going to compete with these other girls. I'm just going to go in there, hit all my targets, and see what happens. And she comes in second, leaves the last shooting in first place, comes in second. It was kind of a very professional and mature race by her, because you could see every lap she was just like, oh yeah, let the crowd go ahead of me. Like, I don't care. I'm just going to do my own thing. And it worked out so well for her. So really showed a lot of maturity, honestly.
Yeah. And you can tell when an athlete is like locked in, you have total confidence in them. And that's exactly what Franziska Preuss is doing right now. And to be frankly honest, none of the other women are even remotely close to that right now, it seems like. So I think they're kind of they're not handing it to Preuss, but because Preuss is definitely earning this for sure. And she's, like you said, she's been super consistent her whole career when she's healthy. I think that's kind of the biggest asterisk with her season so far is when she's healthy, and she's healthy right now. But there's still a lot of racing and a long season left to go. So she might get sick, might have an injury or two here, who knows? But right now she looks, head and shoulders above the rest. This is her race to lose, and if she continues to stay healthy, there's no doubt in my mind that she's going to continue to pull away from everyone else, and might even have some like Johannes Thingnes win margins in the overall come the end of the year.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. We haven't had a dominant woman like this in a while. I'm gonna have to go back and double check, but yeah, maybe we'll talk about that next episode. If she stays healthy and she keeps on this consistency, then yeah, we'll have to go start digging up some historical records to see who was the last time we had a female that just absolutely raked like this. Because it's been so competitive on the women's side the last couple of years that this is almost like uncharted territory for us. All right, so earlier we talked about the Blue Bib on the women's side, but let's take a look at the Blue Bib on the men's side, because I'm not going to lie, Ethan, I was a little cocky, and I was kind of just thinking that that Campbell Wright was going to walk away with this. But I do have to hand it to Vitaly Mazdin from Ukraine. He is being really pesky in this fight, and he will not leave Campbell alone. So at the end of the first trimester, we have Campbell Wright with the Blue Bib, currently ranked 16th overall, but Mansden is 20th overall and only about 40 points back of Campbell. I mean, 40 points, that's like Mansden coming in the third place or something, but she's already come in fourth. So is Campbell, but they both come in the flowers already. That's Mansden coming in the flowers and Campbell coming in the 20s. And boom, suddenly Mansden's got the Blue Bib back. So really interesting little battle going on here on the men's side for the Blue Bib.
Yeah, this is a fun little two-man race to watch that, I'm sure you and I definitely did not see coming, but it kind of seems like it's two different sides of the coin here, where Mansden is shooting extremely well this season at 90%, and that's been his, ticket and key to success. He's skiing a little bit slower than the median or the average back. Campbell's kind of the opposite story, where he's skiing pretty fast and his shooting isn't quite, as ideal as we may be hoping for. But if they continue on this path, like you said, it could flip every single weekend just as easily as it has been so far this year. But I think from our perspective, we're hoping that Campbell kind of pulls it together a little bit on the range. We know he can pull off flower ceremony races any day. So hopefully Campbell can pull away, as our totally unbiased American opinions. But yeah, this has been super fun to watch.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to the junior level, you see Campbell's in the red here, Vitaly is in the green, and they're very evenly matched, even though Campbell does have the win a couple seasons ago in the junior men's sprint. Looks like Vitaly does not have any medals from the junior level, but yeah, really, it's kind of funny watching these two go back and forth, because like you said, Campbell's a little quicker on the skis, but Vitaly is better on the range. So that's why I kind of say like he's pesky, because it's like, okay, Campbell has one miss, he's skiing really well, skiing with the top dogs, leaves the penalty loop right behind Mansden, puts some space on him on the track, comes back into shooting, shoots clean, leaves the range. Who's right behind him? Vitaly Mansden. So it's like, it's going to be a fun race to watch. And this is a guy who I definitely did not recognize. I'm not up on the Ukrainian team probably as well as I should be, but it's been really cool to see this, like you said, this two-man battle, and hopefully it continues the rest of the season, because it's sort of like these next levels that are really fun about biathlon, and that's what these Blue Bibs are supposed to be about. It's not supposed to just be about like, let's give more money to someone, let's have someone wear a random bib. It's supposed to be these extra levels of competitiveness and challenge that the IBU is hoping for, that people like us will talk about and fans will talk about. It's like, oh, okay, maybe Johannes Thingnes is dominating, but that Blue Bib battle, that's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's like when you see the results pop up, at the split times, like, yeah, it's cool to see who's in first and second and third, but to look for these younger athletes that are maybe not quite the top, but are still in the top 20, top 15, like there's a whole nother race in there that you can tune into and be excited about. And I think on the men's, and like we talked about the women's side earlier today, they're both super exciting competitions to be watching that aren't necessarily just for medals, podiums, and flower ceremonies every single race.
Yeah. Before we go, I just want to also point out this guy in third place. Tell me this guy's name's not Conrad Badass, because if it is, that's the greatest name I've ever seen in my life. All right, Ethan, spare round here. Let's make this one quick. And this one is actually going to be hard. Who do you think, after the first trimester, who do you think is going to finish the season in 10th place overall for both men and women?
That might be the toughest spare round we've had
I
in
know.
the history of this podcast.
I actually had to do some research. When I came up with this question, I had to go do some research and be like, who is the type of athlete to finish 10th overall? And it's a complete crapshoot. Sometimes it's like an absolute favorite that completely chokes, and sometimes it's an absolute nobody who is maybe a future overall winner, but they're just unknown. And this was just their first sort of breakout season. So based on the standings as they currently are, we have Fionn Maillet on the men's side and Selena Grotian on the women's side. Who comes in 10th overall at the end of March?
I think for the men, we kind of have to take the approach of one of the older athletes that's had success but isn't quite at the top as often, but still having good races. So I'm going to go Jakob Fack, I think. He's had a good consistent season this year. I think he knows what it takes to have success in this sport, and he's not going to be winning races or podiums, but I think good, solid, consistent season is exactly what he's putting together, and I'm assuming that's roughly what it takes to get top 10 in the overall. So he's my pick for the men. And then for the women, I'm actually going to go with Lisa Vitozzi.
Whoa, okay.
If she comes back, it's probably not going to be, sunshine and rainbows right away. It's probably going to be a little bit of getting back into race fitness. It's her start of the season while everyone else has had a whole trimester to get back in the swing of things. But once she gets it back into gear, we know what she's capable of. And I think she's just missed too much to go higher than 10.
See, this is really interesting because you both of your picks were people who are currently below 10th that you think are going to continue to improve up to 10th.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to say, for me, I think it's going to be Vebjorn Sorum on the men's side. Okay. I think that there's going to be something going on where he doesn't get some spots. He loses some opportunities to race. And because of his good start, he's going to be up there, but he's just going to start falling down the order a little bit. And then on the women's side, I think it's also going to be Suvi Minkkinen, who I think had an amazing start to the season. You cannot overshadow, you cannot take that away from her. But like you said, I think Tannervold's coming back, Vitozzi's coming back. There's some big names that are going to start making their way into the top 10. And there's also some people behind her who I think are going to have some better second halves of the season. So I think she's going to also fall down the order a little bit. But this is probably definitely the hardest spare round we've had. So we'll see what happens at the end. But all right, everybody, thanks so much for joining us this first trimester. It's been an incredible start to the World Cup season, and it's been a lot of fun recapping it every week after the excitement and all the races. So hit that subscribe wherever you listen or watch this podcast, whether it's if you're listening on Spotify, you can also watch us on YouTube, or if you watch on YouTube, you can also listen to us on the go on Spotify or Apple Music. So wherever you get your podcast, you can find us. But thank you so much for an awesome start to the season, and hopefully you have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year's from Brian and Ethan.